The massive alien space station called Crimson Nexus floated in the dark void between star systems like a giant metal flower. Its red and silver walls stretched for miles in every direction, housing the most advanced engineering minds in the known galaxy. Today was special because the Galactic Engineering Council was holding their yearly technology showcase, and every important alien species had sent their best engineers to show off their latest inventions. Jake Morrison stood in the human waiting area and looked through the thick glass windows at the alien presentations happening in the main hall. He was a 43-year-old man from Detroit with rough hands and grease stains on his blue jumpsuit that never seemed to wash out completely. His brown hair was getting thin on top, and his face showed the lines of someone who had spent years fixing things that should not have been fixable. Behind him stood his small team from Earth's newest deep space ship, the UES Liberty Bell. Lisa Park was his second in command, a smart woman from California who could figure out any electronic problem in minutes. She had black hair tied back in a neat ponytail and always carried a toolbox that looked like it had been through several wars. Tony Rodriguez was their electronics specialist, a young man from Texas who could make any piece of broken equipment work again using parts from 3 different machines. Amy Davis handled structural engineering and was probably the strongest person on the team. Despite being only 5 feet tall, the aliens in the main hall were showing off technology that seemed like magic to most humans. The Zilari were tall, thin beings made of what looked like living crystal. They moved their long arms in graceful patterns and created machines that could bend space and time. Their latest invention could make solid matter disappear and reappear anywhere they wanted. The crowd of alien engineers made sounds of approval that translated as applause through the universal communication devices everyone wore. Next came the Vorthek, who looked like giant insects with 6 arms and shiny black shells. They had created biomechanical hybrids that were part machine and part living creature. Their demonstration showed a ship that could heal itself when damaged and grow new parts when needed. The ship looked alive as it twisted and changed shape, making new weapons appear from its flesh-metal skin. The Luminos were beings made of pure energy, who lived inside special containment suits that let them interact with solid matter. They had built constructs made entirely of light that could become solid or energy depending on what was needed. Their ships could phase through attacks and then become dense enough to ram through asteroids. Other species showed equally impressive technology. The Korathians displayed gravity manipulators that could crush a moon or make a planet float. The Nexus builders created structures that existed in multiple dimensions at once. The Phantom race showed stealth technology that made their ships completely invisible to every known type of scanner. Jake watched all this and felt a familiar knot forming in his stomach. Soon it would be humanity's turn, and he knew exactly how the aliens would react to what he had to show them. He looked down at his presentation notes, which were written on actual paper because his tablet had broken 3 weeks ago, and he had not had time to fix it. Lisa walked over to him and saw the worried look on his face. "You okay, boss?" she asked. Quietly, "Just thinking about how this is going to go," Jake replied. "These aliens have technology that can reshape reality, and we're about to show them how we fixed our ship with duct tape and spare parts." Tony laughed from across the room. "Hey, that duct tape saved our lives when the hull got cracked near Saturn. I'd like to see their fancy quantum whatever fix a breach in 30 seconds during a meteor storm." Amy nodded in agreement. "Their stuff looks impressive, but I bet none of it works when you're 3 billion miles from the nearest repair station and all you have is what's in your toolbox." A voice came over the communication system in heavily accented English. "Will the human delegation please report to Presentation Hall 7 for their technology demonstration?" Jake took a deep breath and picked up his bag of tools and spare parts. The 4 humans walked through the curved hallways of the station, passing groups of aliens who looked at them with curiosity. Most aliens were taller than humans, and their technology was so advanced that they wore their machines like jewelry or had them built into their bodies. The presentation hall was enormous, with seats rising up in circles around a central stage. Hundreds of alien engineers filled the seats, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. At the front sat the members of the Galactic Engineering Council, the most important engineers from each major species. Counselor Thexler of the Zalari looked like a living statue made of blue crystal. His voice rang like distant bells when he spoke. Humans of Earth, please demonstrate your engineering capabilities for evaluation. Jake walked onto the stage and activated the holographic display system. Images of the UES Liberty Bell appeared in the air above him, showing the ship in its current condition. The audience became very quiet as they looked at what appeared to be a flying junkyard held together with silver tape and wire. "This is our ship," Jake began. 3 months ago, we were exploring the outer planets when a meteor storm damaged our hull in 17 places. Our main power system failed, our life support was running on backup, and our navigation computer had crashed completely. He clicked to the next image, showing the damaged areas of the ship. We were 2 weeks away from the nearest space station, and we had to fix everything using only what we had on board. The next series of images showed the repairs in detail. Jake explained how they had used duct tape to seal the hull breaches, creating an airtight seal that was actually stronger than the original hull material. He showed how Tony had rewired the power systems using cables from the kitchen equipment, and how Amy had reinforced damaged support beams using metal pipes. From the water recycling system, the audience began to make sounds that the translation devices rendered as confused murmuring. Jake continued his presentation, showing how they had fixed the navigation computer by connecting it to 3 different backup systems using zip ties and electrical tape. He demonstrated how they had created emergency life support by connecting the air recycling system to the hydroponic gardens and 2 coffee machines. The repairs took 36 hours, Jake concluded. The ship has been running perfectly ever since, and actually performs better now than when it was first built. The hall fell completely silent for a long moment. Then Counselor Thexler began to make a sound like crystal chimes breaking. The translation system identified this as laughter. Soon the entire audience was making various sounds of amusement. Queen Engineer Zisk of the Vorthic clicked her mandibles in what was clearly meant to be insulting. This is what humans call engineering. They attach random objects with primitive adhesive and call it technology. Ambassador Bright Current of the Luminos pulsed with colors that indicated polite disapproval. Perhaps humanity would benefit from several more millennia of technological development before seeking membership in this council. Other alien engineers began making comments that the translation system barely bothered to render politely. They called human engineering barbaric, dangerous, and embarrassingly primitive. Some suggested that humanity should be banned from space travel until they learned to build proper technology. Counselor Thexler called for order and then addressed Jake directly. Human Engineer Morrison, while we appreciate your species' enthusiasm for space exploration, the Galactic Engineering Council must maintain certain standards. Your methods, while perhaps effective in desperate situations, do not meet the requirements for advanced technological civilization. The formal vote was swift and unanimous. Humanity was denied membership in the Galactic Engineering Council due to dangerously inadequate technological standards and primitive engineering practices. Jake and his team left the presentation hall in silence, walking past groups of aliens who continued to make amused sounds about the human demonstration. Lisa's face was red with anger, and Tony was muttering things under his breath that would have gotten him in trouble back on Earth. As they reached their shuttle, Jake's communication device beeped with an incoming priority message from Earth. The sender was Admiral Patricia Hayes, commander of Earth's Deep Space Fleet. The message was encrypted and marked urgent. Jake opened the message and read it quickly. His face went pale as he read the words twice to make sure he understood correctly. Long-range sensors had detected a massive fleet of unknown ships approaching from outside the galaxy. The ships were huge, dark, and moving in perfect formation. They had already destroyed 3 automated monitoring stations without any attempt at communication. Jake looked up at his team and then at the alien station around them. We need to get back to Earth immediately, he said quietly. Something is coming. And these aliens who just laughed at our engineering are about to find out that sometimes the simplest solutions are the only ones that work. 3 weeks after the humiliation at Crimson Nexus, Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty Bell watching emergency broadcasts flood in from across the galaxy. The first reports had seemed like isolated incidents, but now a clear pattern was emerging that made his blood run cold. The mining colony at Kepler Station had gone silent on a Tuesday morning. Their last transmission was a routine status report about mineral extraction quotas. When the supply ship arrived 3 days later, they found empty buildings and equipment still running, but no sign of the 2,000 people who lived there. The colonists had simply vanished without any distress calls or signs of struggle. Admiral Patricia Hayes appeared on the main screen from Earth Command, her gray hair pulled back tightly and worry lines deep around her eyes. She had been Jake's commanding officer for 8 years, and he had never seen her look this concerned. "The situation is getting worse by the hour," she reported. "We've lost contact with 17 colonies, 4 mining stations, and 6 deep space research facilities. In every case, there were no distress signals and no evidence of conventional weapons damage." Lisa Park stood beside Jake, studying the tactical display that showed the locations of all the missing installations. "There's a pattern here," she said, tracing her finger across the star map. "Whatever is doing this is moving in a straight line toward the core systems where most of the advanced civilizations live." Tony Rodriguez looked up from his electronic station where he had been monitoring alien communication channels. "The weird thing is, whatever hit these places didn't just destroy them. According to the few automated systems still broadcasting, it looks like someone or something took everything. Ships, equipment, technology, even the metal from the buildings." Amy Davis frowned as she reviewed structural analysis reports from the abandoned sites. "It's like something came through and harvested every piece of advanced technology it could find. But why leave the basic stuff behind?" Their questions were answered 2 days later when the first survivors made it to a safe system. Captain Roy Jenkins had been commanding a cargo hauler near the frontier when his ship detected massive energy signatures approaching the research station he was supposed to resupply. Instead of fleeing immediately, he had hidden his ship behind an asteroid and watched what happened next. "They came out of nowhere," Jenkins reported during his debrief with Earth Command. "Ships like nothing I've ever seen before, all black and covered in what looked like pieces of other ships. They moved like they were alive, changing shape as they flew. The attacking vessels had surrounded the research station and extended long, mechanical tentacles that began cutting through the hull. But instead of destroying the station, they carefully removed every piece of advanced technology, while leaving the basic life support and structural elements untouched. The worst part was the scanning," Jenkins continued. "These ships sent out beams that seemed to analyze everything they touched. Every time the beams hit a piece of equipment, the attacking ships would change slightly, like they were learning from what they found." More reports came in over the following days, each one adding to the growing picture of an enemy unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced. The attackers called themselves the Devourer Collective, and they had been traveling between galaxies for millions of years, consuming the technology of every civilization they encountered. Dr. Corinne Walsh, a xenobiologist who had been studying the abandoned sites, provided the most disturbing analysis. "These beings appear to be a hive mind of machines that can absorb and integrate any technology they encounter. Every ship they capture, every weapon they analyze, every piece of equipment they steal makes them stronger and more adaptable. The Devourer ships were not built in the traditional sense. Instead, they were grown from the absorbed remains of countless conquered civilizations. Each vessel was a nightmarish amalgamation of technologies that should never have worked together, held in harmony by the collective's advanced artificial intelligence on Crimson Nexus Station. Panic spread through the alien engineering community as reports of the collective reached them. The same species that had laughed at human engineering just weeks before now found themselves facing an enemy that made their most advanced weapons seem like toys. "Counselor, Wexler called an emergency meeting of the Galactic Engineering Council. The blue crystal alien who had dismissed humanity so casually now spoke with desperate urgency. The collective has analyzed and countered every weapon system we have deployed against them. Our quantum phase manipulators are useless because they have adapted shields that exist in multiple dimensions. Our biomechanical hybrids are somehow being converted and turned against us. Queen Engineer Zith of the Vorthek reported that 3 of her species' most advanced warships had been completely absorbed by devourer vessels in less than an hour. Their scanning systems analyzed our biomechanical integration and then replicated it perfectly. Our own ships became part of their fleet. Ambassador Bright Current of the Luminos delivered perhaps the most frightening news. The collective can absorb pure energy constructs. Our light-based weapons and defenses are being turned into power sources for their ships. The more we attack them, the stronger they become. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Every advanced technology that the galaxy's greatest civilizations had developed was not only useless against the collective, but actually made the enemy stronger. The Devourer's artificial intelligence was so sophisticated that it could analyze any technology within minutes and develop countermeasures within hours, Counselor Wexler made a desperate announcement that was broadcast to every civilized world. In the galaxy, any species that can provide effective countermeasures against the Devourer collective will be granted immediate full membership in the Galactic Engineering Council, along with leadership positions in our defense planning. The offer was remarkable because the Council had never before admitted that any of their member species needed help from outsiders. But with their fleets being destroyed and their colonies disappearing one by one, even the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy were running out of options. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison and his crew aboard the UES Liberty Bell were conducting routine patrol duty near the frontier when their long-range sensors detected something approaching from deep space. The object was moving fast and appeared to be following the same course that the previous attacks had taken. Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, Lisa reported from the sensor station. Distance approximately 50,000 kilometers in closing. Configuration unknown. Jake studied the readings on his display screen and felt his stomach drop. The approaching vessel was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the Liberty Bell, and its energy signature was unlike anything in the Earth fleets. Database. All stop, he ordered. Cut main power and switch to emergency systems only. Tony, I want you to make us look as small and uninteresting as possible. The crew followed emergency protocols they had practiced dozens of times. The ship's main reactor powered down to minimal levels. All non-essential systems went offline, and they began drifting like a piece of space debris through the main view screen. They watched as the alien vessel came into visual range. Jake had seen Jenkins' reports, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of a Devourer ship. The hull appeared to be made from pieces of hundreds of different vessels, welded and grown together into a shape that hurt to look at directly. Weapons that clearly came from different species jutted out at random angles, and the entire surface pulsed with energy patterns that seemed to shift and change every few seconds. Scanning beams, Amy reported quietly. They're analyzing everything in this area. The Devourer ship extended multiple sensor arrays and began methodically examining every object within range. Jake watched the beams pass over asteroids, space, debris, and finally sweep across the Liberty Bell itself, but something unexpected happened. The scanning beam hit their ship and then seemed to hesitate. The collective sensors were designed to identify and catalog advanced technology, but what they found on the human vessel did not fit any known patterns. The Liberty Bell's systems were a mixture of original Earth technology and improvised repairs that Jake's crew had made over months of deep space operations. Hull breaches sealed with duct tape confused sensors designed to analyze advanced composite materials. Wiring systems held together with zip ties and electrical tape did not register as intentional engineering solutions. Tony watched his electronics, bored, and whispered, "Their scans keep coming back with error messages. It's like their computer can't figure out what our ship is supposed to be." The Devourer vessel moved closer, clearly puzzled by what it was detecting. Its artificial intelligence was programmed to understand and counter sophisticated technology, but the Liberty Bell appeared to be a collection of random components held together by primitive adhesives. Lisa checked the communications array and reported, "They're broadcasting analysis data back to their fleet. From what I can decode, they're classifying us as damaged debris rather than an active vessel." Jake realized they had stumbled onto something potentially important. The collective's intelligence was so advanced that it could not. The Devourer scout ship moved closer to the Liberty Bell like a predator closing in on wounded prey. Jake Morrison watched the massive alien vessel approach and knew that running was not an option. The enemy ship was faster, better armed, and had already demonstrated that it could absorb and counter any conventional technology it encountered. "Distance 15 kilometers and closing," Lisa reported from her station. "They're charging what looks like multiple weapon systems." Jake studied the tactical display and made a decision that went against every piece of military training he had ever received. Instead of trying to flee or fight conventionally, he was going to embrace the chaos that seemed to confuse the collective's artificial intelligence. "Tony, I need you to shut down our main engines and make it look like we're having a catastrophic system failure," he ordered. "Amy, start venting atmosphere from the cargo bay. Make it look dramatic, but don't actually compromise life support." His crew looked at him like he had lost his mind, but they had worked together long enough to trust his judgment even when his plans sounded crazy. Tony began shutting down systems in a specific sequence that would create the appearance of cascade. Failures throughout the ship, the Liberty Bell began tumbling through space as if its stabilization systems had failed. Clouds of vapor streamed from what appeared to be hull breaches, and several of the ship's external lights began flashing in patterns that suggested emergency conditions. The Devourer ship slowed its approach, apparently confused by the human vessel's behavior. Its scanning beams intensified as it tried to determine whether this was a trick or if the prey was actually dying on its own. "There is running probability calculations," Lisa reported, monitoring the alien communications. "It's trying to figure out if we're worth the energy expenditure to finish us off." Jake waited until the enemy vessel moved within 5 kilometers before implementing the next phase of his plan. "Now, Tony, execute Murphy's Law protocol." Tony Rodriguez grinned and began activating systems throughout the ship that had never been intended to work together. He rerouted main power through the coffee machine's heating elements, creating an emergency propulsion system that pushed the Liberty Bell in an apparently random direction. The sudden movement surprised the Devourer ship, which had calculated that the human vessel was completely disabled. But instead of moving away from the alien threat, the Liberty Bell spiraled directly toward the enemy's hull in what appeared to be an uncontrolled crash trajectory. The collective's artificial intelligence faced a situation it had never encountered before. Its analysis indicated that the human ship was suffering multiple system failures, but its movement suggested either sophisticated evasive maneuvers or complete loss of control. The AI could not determine which interpretation was correct. Amy Davis activated the next part of Jake's plan by ejecting what appeared to be escape pods from the Liberty Bell's cargo bay. But instead of carrying crew members to safety, the pods contained improvised weapons that she had constructed from mining equipment and kitchen appliances. "Microwave-powered electromagnetic pulse generators away," she reported with satisfaction. "Target acquisition in 30 seconds. The Devourer ship's sensors detected the approaching pods and classified them as fleeing civilians attempting to escape in primitive lifeboats. The alien vessel's programming included protocols for capturing survivors for analysis, so it extended mechanical tentacles to collect what it assumed were helpless refugees. The first pod was seized by a mechanical appendage and drawn toward the Devourer ship's hull. When the tentacle made contact, Amy's improvised weapon activated and sent a powerful electromagnetic pulse directly into the alien vessel's outer systems. The pulse was not sophisticated enough to damage the collective's main technology, but it caused temporary interference with the ship's external sensors. More importantly, it demonstrated that the humans were not as helpless as they appeared. "They're recalculating our threat level," Lisa reported. "But their analysis keeps returning contradictory results." The Devourer ship's AI was designed to process and counter advanced technology, but the Liberty Bell's jury-rigged systems did not conform to any logical pattern. Every scan returned data that suggested the human vessel was simultaneously primitive and sophisticated, damaged and functional, threatening and harmless. Jake watched the alien ship's behavior and realized that its artificial intelligence was experiencing something that could only be described as confusion. The collective had conquered countless civilizations by analyzing their technology and developing perfect countermeasures, but it had never encountered a species that used randomness and improvisation as primary engineering principles. "Full power to all systems," he ordered. "Time to show them what human engineering can really do." The Liberty Bell's main engines came online with a roar that surprised even its own crew. Tony had spent the previous few minutes rerouting power through unconventional pathways, and the result was that the ship now had 30% more thrust than its original specifications, but instead of using the extra power for a conventional attack, Jake implemented a maneuver that he called controlled chaos. The Liberty Bell began flying in patterns that appeared random but were actually calculated to confuse the enemy's targeting systems. The ship spun and tumbled through space while simultaneously accelerating in multiple directions. Its movement looked like the death throes of a damaged vessel, but every erratic motion was precisely planned to avoid the Devourer ship's weapon targeting predictions. Amy activated her next surprise, which she had been preparing since their encounter with the scout ship began. Hidden throughout the Liberty Bell's hull were what appeared to be structural damage and random debris, but were actually explosive charges made from mining equipment and fertilizer. "Explosive camouflage ready for detonation," she reported. "Target is within optimal range." The Devourer ship moved closer, trying to get a clear shot at what its AI calculated were the Liberty Bell's vital systems. But the alien vessel's targeting computer was programmed to identify the most important components of sophisticated spacecraft, not to deal with a ship that had been deliberately designed to look like flying junk. When the Devourer ship fired its main weapons, the energy beam struck what appeared to be the most critical targets on the human vessel. The alien AI had identified large, prominently placed components as primary systems that needed to be destroyed first, but Jake's crew had spent months camouflaging their real equipment and creating fake targets from cargo containers and old machinery. The Devourer ship's perfectly aimed shots destroyed a broken refrigerator, 2 empty fuel tanks, and a communications array that had not worked properly since the ship left Earth. "Direct hits on decoy targets 7, 12, and 15, Amy reported with grim satisfaction. "Real systems are undamaged." The Liberty Bell responded to the attack by appearing to suffer catastrophic damage while actually implementing the most aggressive phase of Jake's plan. The ship's hull began separating in sections, making it look like the vessel was breaking apart under the alien weapons fire, but the separating hull sections were actually Amy's improvised armor plating, held in place by a network of cables and controlled explosive bolts. As the outer shell came apart, it revealed that the real Liberty Bell was smaller and more maneuverable than the Devourer ship had calculated. "Now, Tony," Jake ordered, "hit them with everything we've got." Tony activated what he proudly called his masterpiece of improvisational engineering. He had converted the ship's garbage disposal system into a kinetic projectile launcher, using compressed air from the life support system to fire pieces of scrap metal at incredible velocities. The improvised weapon system fired a stream of debris that included everything from broken tools to empty food containers. None of the projectiles were sophisticated enough to be detected by the Devourer ship's advanced defense systems, which were designed to counter energy weapons and guided missiles. The barrage of random junk struck the alien vessel's hull with devastating effect. The collective shields were programmed to stop coherent energy beams and sophisticated projectiles, but they could not adapt to being pelted with old coffee cups and broken circuit boards. traveling at several thousand meters per second. Target is showing hull damage, Lisa reported with amazement. Their shields are designed for advanced weapons, not flying garbage. The Devourer ship's AI entered what could only be described as a state of mechanical panic. Every analysis of the human vessel returned impossible results. The Liberty Bell appeared to be a primitive spacecraft held together with adhesive tape, but it was demonstrating combat capabilities that defied all logical analysis. Jake saw his opportunity and ordered the final phase of the attack. Amy, prepare boarding charges. We're going to pay them a visit. Amy had spent the entire battle preparing what she called her special delivery system. Using the ship's emergency airlocks and some creative modifications involving industrial adhesive and improvised propulsion systems, she had created a way to get Jake's team aboard the enemy vessel. The boarding pod was a testament to human engineering at its most chaotic. It consisted of a cargo container reinforced with spare hull plating and equipped with life support systems salvaged from broken spacesuits. Admiral Patricia Hayes stood in the command center at Earth Defense Headquarters and studied the tactical displays that showed the approaching Devourer fleet. Thousands of red dots moved across the star maps in perfect formation, each one representing a vessel capable of absorbing entire civilizations. The largest concentrations were still 3 weeks away from Earth, but advanced scout groups were already probing the outer colonies. Jake Morrison had returned from his encounter with the enemy scout ship 2 days earlier, and his report had changed everything the military thought they knew about fighting the collective. Instead of preparing for a conventional space battle, Earth's forces were now implementing the most unconventional strategy in human history. Status report, Admiral Hayes requested as Jake entered the command center. The message has been sent. To every human ship in the sector, Jake replied. Response has been better than we hoped. Captain Roy Jenkins is en route with his mining vessel and a cargo hold full of industrial adhesive. Dr. Karen Walsh has modified her research ship to look like it was assembled by someone who had never seen a blueprint. Commander Pete Sullivan is bringing what he calls his masterpiece of accidental engineering. The plan Jake had proposed sounded insane to anyone trained in conventional military tactics. Instead of trying to match the collective's advanced technology, humanity would embrace its reputation for chaotic engineering and turn it into a weapon. Every human ship in the sector had been ordered to make themselves look even more jury-rigged and improvised than they already were. Lisa Park entered the command center, carrying a datapad filled with technical specifications that would have horrified any alien engineer. I've finished the modifications to the defensive satellites around Earth, she reported. They now appear to be held together with duct tape and prayer, but they're actually more heavily armed than before. Amy Davis looked up from her workstation, where she had been designing what she called combat jury-rigging techniques. I've prepared instruction manuals for making ships look vulnerable while actually reinforcing critical systems. The key is to make everything appear random and chaotic while following a hidden logical pattern that only we understand. Tony Rodriguez finished his analysis of the Devourer communication intercepts and provided an update that made everyone in the room pause. The scout ship we encountered has been broadcasting warning signals to the main fleet. From what I can decode, it's trying to explain human engineering methods to the other AI systems. But here's the interesting part. The other collective ships keep rejecting the data because it doesn't fit their logical parameters. Admiral Hayes studied the information and realized what this meant. The collective's artificial intelligence is so sophisticated that it cannot accept the possibility of truly random engineering solutions. When one ship reports that humans use duct tape as primary technology, the other ships classify the report as damage-induced errors. Over the following week, human vessels began arriving at the rendezvous point Jake had designated in the asteroid belt beyond Mars. Each ship that appeared was a testament to humanity's ability to make anything work with enough determination and improvisation. Captain Roy Jenkins arrived first in his converted asteroid mining ship, the Rough Diamond. The vessel looked like it had been built from spare parts found in a junkyard, which was not far from the truth. Jenkins had spent 3 months converting mining lasers into weapons and reinforcing the hull with metal plates held in place by industrial adhesive. "She's not pretty," Jenkins admitted as he met with Jake aboard the Liberty Bell. "But she's tough as nails, and the Devourer's sensors won't know what to make of her. I've got enough spare parts and duct tape to modify 50 ships if needed." Dr. Karen Walsh's research vessel, the Scientific Method, was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. What appeared to be a ship barely holding together was actually a sophisticated scientific platform disguised as a flying accident. Walsh had spent years working in frontier conditions where improvisation was a survival skill. "I've modified our sensor arrays to look like random antenna assemblies," Walsh explained during the tactical briefing. "But they're actually more sensitive than standard military sensors? The Collective's AI will see junk, but we'll be able to track their movements with perfect accuracy." The most impressive arrival belonged to Commander Pete Sullivan, whose ship the Second Chance had been damaged in a meteor storm 6 months earlier. Instead of returning to Earth for proper repairs, Sullivan's crew had essentially rebuilt the entire vessel using salvaged components from 3 different ship classes. "We call her the Frankenstein Special," Sullivan said with pride. "She's got engines from a cargo hauler, weapons from a patrol boat, and life support systems from a research vessel. On paper, nothing should work together, but she flies better than anything else I've ever commanded." Jake assembled all the ship captains for a comprehensive briefing on their strategy. The main display showed a 3-dimensional map of the approaching Devourer fleet and the defensive positions human forces would take. "The Collective expects us to fight like a conventional military force," Jake explained. "They'll position their ships to counter organized formations and coordinated attacks. Instead, we're going to give them what their AI cannot process: complete chaos." The human fleet would spread across multiple star systems, with each ship operating independently, according to its own improvised battle plan. No 2 vessels would use the same tactics, and none of them would follow standard military procedures. Lisa presented her analysis of Devourer behavioral patterns based on their encounter with the scout ship. "Their AI makes decisions by analyzing patterns and predicting enemy responses. When they encounter true randomness, their decision-making processes begin to break down. The key is to be unpredictable without being stupid." Amy demonstrated the combat modifications that each ship would implement. "Make everything look like it's about to fall apart, but ensure that critical systems are actually more protected than before. Use decoy components to draw enemy fire away from real targets. Most importantly, never do what the enemy expects you to do." The preparations took another week as human crews worked around the clock to transform their ships into weapons of organized chaos. Engineers who had spent their careers trying to make things work properly now dedicated themselves to making everything look broken while actually improving performance. Captain Jenkins supervised the installation of fake hull breaches made from cardboard and aluminum foil. The artificial damage would confuse enemy targeting systems while hiding additional armor plating underneath. His mining lasers were disguised as random salvage, while actually being upgraded with power systems stolen from cargo haulers. Dr. Walsh created what appeared to be a completely disorganized sensor array using coat hangers, Christmas lights, and old satellite dishes. The ridiculous-looking assembly was actually a sophisticated early warning system that could detect Devourer ships from twice the normal range. Commander Sullivan's crew went even further, coating their ship's hull with random junk held in place by visible duct tape and zip ties. Hidden beneath the apparent debris were explosive charges that could be detonated when enemy ships moved in. For close examination, Tony Rodriguez established a communication network that looked like it was held together with string and good intentions, but was actually more secure than standard military channels. The system used modified CB radios, signal flags, and even Morse code transmitted through hull vibrations. When the human fleet was finally ready, it looked like a collection of ships that should not have been space-worthy. Any conventional military force would have dismissed them as flying junkyards. But Jake knew that appearances could be deceiving, especially when the deception was intentional. Admiral Hayes transmitted the final orders from Earth Command. All human vessels, you are authorized to engage the enemy using any methods you deem effective. There are no restrictions on tactics, weapons, or engineering solutions. Make us proud. The Devourer Advance Fleet arrived in the Outer System 3 days later, expecting to encounter desperate resistance from primitive humans using inferior technology. Long-range sensors detected the human ships scattered across several planets, apparently trying to hide behind asteroids and debris fields. The collective's artificial intelligence analyzed the defensive positions and calculated that the humans were attempting a conventional guerrilla strategy using inferior equipment. The AI developed countermeasures based on millions of years of experience, conquering similar civilizations, but when the first Devourer ships moved in to engage what appeared to be easy targets, they encountered something that violated every tactical assumption in their databases. Human vessels that looked like they were barely functional suddenly demonstrated capabilities that made no logical sense. Captain Jenkins's mining ship appeared to suffer a catastrophic explosion when enemy weapons struck its hull. But the explosion was actually a controlled detonation that scattered what looked like debris, but was actually a cloud of sensor-jamming chaff mixed with explosive charges. When the Devourer ships entered the debris field to finish off what they assumed was a destroyed enemy, the final battle began not with the thunderous roar of massive weapons or the brilliant flash of energy beams, but with what appeared to be a complete disaster for humanity. Human ships scattered in all directions across 3 star systems, seemingly in full retreat as the main Devourer fleet arrived with overwhelming force. Jake Morrison watched from the Liberty Bell's command center as thousands of alien vessels emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Each Devourer ship was a nightmare amalgamation of absorbed technologies, their hulls gleaming with the stolen achievements of 100 conquered civilizations. All human vessels execute dispersal pattern chaos, Jake transmitted on the emergency frequency. Remember, we're not retreating, we're positioning for maximum confusion. Captain Roy Jenkins was the first to implement what the humans had privately named the Flying Junkyard Maneuver. His mining ship, the Rough Diamond, suddenly began venting atmosphere and spinning wildly as if it had suffered a catastrophic system failure. Pieces of hull plating appeared to break away from the ship, tumbling through space like debris from a destroyed vessel. The nearest Devourer ships immediately altered course to investigate what their sensors identified as a crippled enemy vessel. Their artificial intelligence calculated that the mining ship would be easy to capture and analyze, providing valuable data about human technology. But as the alien vessels closed in, Jenkins activated the real purpose of his apparent system failure. The debris breaking away from his ship was actually a network of remote-controlled explosive devices, each one disguised to look like random scrap metal. "Contact detonation in 3, 2, 1, Jenkins announced calmly. The space around the Devourer ships erupted in a carefully orchestrated series of explosions. None of the individual charges was powerful enough to destroy an enemy vessel, but together they created a chaos field that overwhelmed the aliens' sophisticated sensors. Dr. Corinne Walsh's research ship, the scientific method, provided the next surprise for the collective's artificial intelligence. Her vessel appeared to be leaking its entire atmosphere in a desperate attempt to reach safety behind a nearby moon. 3 Devourer ships moved to intercept what they calculated was a fleeing research vessel carrying valuable scientific data. But as they entered the expanding cloud of escaping gases, their sensors began receiving thousands of false readings. The atmosphere Walsh was venting was actually a mixture of metallic chaff, electromagnetic interference particles, and sensor jamming, compounds that she had originally developed for studying stellar phenomena. When the pursuing ships tried to lock onto their target, they found themselves surrounded by ghost images and phantom contacts. Deploying secondary countermeasures, Walsh reported as she activated the next phase of her plan. Hidden within the sensor jamming cloud were dozens of small drones that had been disguised as emergency beacons. As the Devourer ships struggled to sort real contacts from false ones, The drones attached themselves to the alien hulls and began broadcasting confusing signals directly into the enemy sensor arrays. Commander Pete Sullivan's ship, the Second Chance, provided perhaps the most spectacular demonstration of human creativity under pressure. His vessel appeared to be coming apart at the seams as Devourer forces closed in, with entire sections of hull plating separating and floating away, but Sullivan had spent months preparing for this moment. What looked like catastrophic structural failure was actually the controlled separation of an outer hull that had been designed to break away in sections. Each piece was equipped with simple engines and basic navigation systems that made them appear to be escape pods. The Devourer ships immediately began trying to capture the fleeing survivors, not realizing that the pods contained everything from explosive charges to industrial adhesive bombs. As alien vessels opened their cargo bays to collect the pods, they received unexpected surprises that gummed up their internal systems and created chaos throughout their ships. Hull separation complete, Sullivan reported with satisfaction. The real Second Chance is now 30% smaller and twice as maneuverable as the enemy calculated. Jake watched the opening moves of the battle and felt a fierce pride in what his fellow humans were accomplishing. Every ship was implementing its own unique version of controlled chaos, and the collective's perfect artificial intelligence was struggling to process enemies that refused to behave according to logical patterns. All vessels implement Phase 2, Jake ordered. Time to show them what happens when humans stop playing defense. The scattered human ships suddenly changed tactics from apparent retreat to aggressive offense, but not in any way the Devourer fleet could have predicted. Instead of forming organized attack formations, they began implementing what could only be described as weaponized randomness. Captain Jenkins revealed that his mining ship carried more than just explosive devices. Hidden beneath layers of fake hull damage were industrial lasers that had been modified to cut through alien armor, using techniques originally developed for asteroid mining, but instead of firing in predictable patterns, Jenkins used his weapons. Like a craftsman working with difficult materials, he carved seemingly random holes in enemy hulls, creating structural weaknesses that caused Devourer ships to literally fall apart when they attempted high-speed maneuvers. Dr. Walsh demonstrated that science could be just as dangerous as military weapons when applied creatively. Her research equipment included atmospheric processors designed for terraforming, but she had modified them to work in reverse, creating localized environmental hazards that confused alien life support systems. Commander Sullivan's reduced size ship proved to be a nightmare for enemy targeting computers. The Second Chance was now small enough to hide in the sensor shadows of destroyed Devourer vessels, popping up to attack from angles that the alien AI had calculated as impossible. But the real surprise came when the human ships began coordinating their seemingly random attacks. What appeared to be chaotic individual actions was actually a carefully planned strategy that Jake had developed based on his understanding of human psychology and alien artificial intelligence. Lisa, signal the fleet, Jake ordered. Execute. The duct tape gambit. Lisa Park activated a communication sequence that had been disguised as random radio chatter. Across the battle zone, human ships began implementing the most audacious part of their strategy. Every human vessel suddenly appeared to suffer multiple system failures simultaneously. Ships began spinning out of control, venting atmosphere, and broadcasting distress signals in a dozen different languages. To the Devourer fleet's artificial intelligence, it looked like the human forces had finally collapsed under the pressure of superior technology. The collective ships moved in for what they calculated would be easy captures ready to absorb the human vessels and add their technology to the growing mass of the Devourer fleet. This was the moment that the artificial intelligence had been programmed to achieve, total victory over another species. But as the alien ships opened their cargo bays and extended their absorption tentacles, they discovered that the humans had saved their most devastating surprise for last. Instead of valuable technology to absorb, the Devourer ships received Jake Morrison's masterpiece, several tons of industrial adhesive, millions of zip ties, and what appeared to be every roll of duct tape in human space, all delivered via improvised projectile systems that had been disguised as emergency equipment. The adhesive bombs did not destroy the collective ships in any conventional sense. Instead, they did something far worse. They gummed up the works. Critical systems became physically stuck together as the industrial adhesive spread through the alien vessels. Perfectly integrated technology, precision machinery that had operated flawlessly for millions of years suddenly found itself clogged with substances it had never been designed to encounter. Mechanical components that moved with atomic-level precision became frozen in place by compounds that hardened on contact with alien metals. The Devourer ship's self-repair systems, attempting to adapt to this new threat, began incorporating the foreign materials into their repairs. But instead of improving the ship's capabilities, this created an ever-spreading web of dysfunction as zip ties and duct tape became integrated into critical systems. Jake Morrison watched the enemy fleet literally fall apart from being held together with human engineering and activated his ship's main communication array. His message was broadcast on every frequency that the collective monitored, delivered in the flat, practical tones of a man who had spent his life making impossible things work. This is Chief Engineer Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Liberty Bell, broadcasting to the Devourer Collective. You came to our space thinking you understood technology. You believed that engineering was about perfection and precision. You calculated that advanced civilizations would always defeat primitive ones. On the main screen, Jake could see Devourer. Ships struggling with systems that no longer responded to commands, their perfect integration compromised by the chaotic influence of human improvisation. You were wrong about everything, Jake continued. Engineering is not about creating perfect systems. It is about making things work when they should not. It is about finding solutions that make no sense but get the job done anyway.